June 6, 1944. 160,000 men are about to attempt the impossible. They're crossing the English Channel, heading straight into Hitler's fortress Europe. The Germans are waiting. The Atlantic Wall, a 1,500-mile chain of bunkers, mines, and artillery stands between them and victory. Eisenhower knows that if they fail, the war could be lost. He's already written a letter accepting full blame for the disaster. But here's the thing, Hitler is looking in the wrong direction. While the largest invasion force in human history bears down on Normandy, the Führer's attention is locked on Calais, 150 miles to the northeast. An entire phantom army complete with inflatable tanks, fake radio chatter, and commanded by General Patton himself has convinced him that's where the real attack will come. This is the story of Operation Overlord, the most audacious military gamble of World War II, built on a foundation of lies, brilliant planning, and the courage of thousands who knew they might not survive the day. Let's rewind to 1940. France has fallen. The British Army, battered and broken, evacuated 338,000 troops from Dunkirk, barely escaping total annihilation. Hitler controlled Western Europe from Norway to the Spanish border. Britain stood alone. But Churchill knew that one day they'd have to go back. Not to raid, not to harass, but to smash through Hitler's defenses and liberate Europe. The question wasn't if, it was when, where, and how. For 3 long years the Allies debated. Stalin, leading the brutal Eastern Front where millions of Soviet soldiers were dying, demanded a second front. He wanted the Western Allies to split Germany's attention to relieve the crushing pressure on his forces. At the Tehran Conference in November 1943, Roosevelt and Churchill finally promised. May 1944, they would invade. The man chosen to lead this impossible mission was General Dwight D. Eisenhower. On December 7, 1943, President Roosevelt sent a handwritten note to Stalin announcing Eisenhower's appointment as Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force. The weight of the free world now rested on his shoulders, but Eisenhower inherited a plan that terrified him. The original Cossack plan, drafted by British Lieutenant General Frederick Morgan, called for just 3 divisions to hit the beaches, with 2 more in support. 3 divisions against Hitler's Atlantic Wall. Eisenhower and his ground commander, General Bernard Montgomery, looked at the plan and immediately said, "This isn't enough. This is suicide." They demanded expansion. 5 assault divisions on the beaches. 3 airborne divisions dropping behind enemy lines. A 50-mile front instead of 25, and they needed Cherbourg, a deep-water port that could handle the massive logistics of supplying an invasion force. There was just one problem. They didn't have enough landing craft. The Mediterranean campaign and Pacific theater had absorbed most of them. Expanding the invasion meant finding or building hundreds more amphibious vessels. It would take time, precious time. D-Day was pushed back 1 month from May to June 1944. The clock was ticking. By May 1944, southern England had become the world's largest military staging area. Nearly 2.9 million Allied troops were amassed in camps, airfields, and ports. Over 5,000 ships lay at anchor. More than 11,000 aircraft filled the skies during practice runs. The sheer scale was staggering. Eventually, 39 divisions would fight in Normandy, 22 American, 12 British, 3 Canadian, 1 Polish, and 1 French. Over 1 million troops, all aimed at Hitler's fortress. But every soldier, every tank, every ship was a potential leak. If the Germans discovered when and where the invasion would strike, they could concentrate their forces and drive the Allies back into the sea. Churchill understood this perfectly. On March 26, 1944, he addressed the British people with a stark warning. Secrecy was everything. One slip could doom the entire operation. That's where the lies began. At the Tehran Conference, Churchill told Stalin something that would become legendary. In wartime, truth is so precious that she should always be attended by a bodyguard of lies. That quote inspired the code name for history's most elaborate military deception, Operation Bodyguard. And it would prove to be just as important as the invasion itself. The genius of Bodyguard was on trying to convince the Germans that no invasion was coming. They already knew one was. Hitler had been obsessing over it for months. No, the goal was simpler and more devious. Make them think it was coming somewhere else, at a different time, and with different forces than reality. The deception played on a principle called Magruder's principle. It's far easier to reinforce what someone already believes than to change their mind. And Hitler already believed something crucial: the invasion would come at Pas-de-Calais. It made perfect sense. Calais was only 21 miles from Dover, the shortest route across the English Channel. From there, it was a straight shot to the heart of Germany. The Ruhr industrial region, Germany's economic powerhouse, was within reach. Hitler was so convinced that he poured resources into defending Calais, building massive fortifications and stationing his strongest units there. The Allies decided to let him keep believing it. Operation Fortitude, the main component of Bodyguard, had two parts. Fortitude North would threaten Norway, and Fortitude South would reinforce the fiction that Pas-de-Calais was the real target. But how do you fake an entire army? First, you create ghost divisions. The centerpiece was the 1st United States Army Group FUSAG. On paper, it was a massive force, 11 divisions, 150,000 troops, all stationed in southeastern England, poised to strike at Calais. The commanding officer? General George Patton, the most aggressive and feared American general, the man the Germans respected and dreaded most. There was just one problem: FUSAG didn't exist. It was a phantom. The Allies went to extraordinary lengths to make it look real. They built fake camps visible from the air. Inflatable rubber tanks that could be inflated in minutes and looked authentic from German reconnaissance planes. Wooden landing craft that bobbed in harbors around Dover. They even had set designers from British film studios create fake buildings and equipment. But the physical deception was almost beside the point. What really sold it was the radio traffic. Hidden deep in the tunnels beneath Dover Castle, British and Canadian signalers worked around the clock in brutal 8-hour shifts, 7 days a week. They transmitted thousands of fake-coded messages, simulating the radio chatter of an entire army preparing for invasion. The operators had no idea what they were sending. It was all encrypted. But the Germans intercepted it all, and their analysts concluded, there's a massive force building in the southeast. The deception worked because the Germans never saw it coming. Why? Because British intelligence had achieved something remarkable. They had captured or turned every single German spy in Britain, every single one. I-5 ran a program called the 20 Committee, so named because the Roman numerals for 20XX form a double cross. These double agents fed carefully crafted lies to their German handlers, and Berlin swallowed it whole. The star of the show was Juan Pujol Garcia, codenamed Agent Garbo. Garcia was a Spanish businessman who created an entirely fictional network of 27 sub-agents across Britain, each feeding intelligence to the Germans. His reports were so detailed, so convincing, that the Germans paid him regularly and trusted him completely. Garcia's fake agents reported troop movements, equipment deliveries, and preparations, all pointing to Calais. His information was so valuable that after the war, the Germans awarded him the Iron Cross. What they did know was that the British had also awarded him the Order of the British Empire. He's one of the few people in history to receive high honors from both sides. But Fortitude South wasn't the only game in town. Fortitude North created a phantom invasion threat to Norway. Double agents Mutt and Jeff transmitted reports of a British Fourth Army assembling in Scotland, supposedly preparing to join Soviet forces in attacking Scandinavia. Hitler bought it. Just weeks before D-Day, he transferred an entire division to Norway soldiers who could have been defending France. The deception extended to the air war. In the months before D-Day, Allied bombers systematically destroyed roads, railways, and bridges across northern France. But they didn't just bomb Normandy. That would give the game away. For every target hit in Normandy, 2 were hit in the Pas-de-Calais region. The pattern reinforced the lie. Calais is the target. Even on the night of the invasion itself, the lies continued. Operation Taxable saw RAF 617 squadron the famous dambusters, flying precise patterns over the English Channel, dropping thousands of strips of aluminum foil called window. On German radar screens, it looked like a massive naval convoy heading straight for Calais. The illusion was supported by a small flotilla of boats towing barrage balloons, mimicking a genuine invasion fleet. Meanwhile, Operation Glimmer created another phantom fleet heading toward Boulogne-sur-Mer. 80 miles from the actual landing beaches. And if that wasn't enough, Operation Titanic dropped hundreds of dummy paratroopers over Le Havre and Isigny, far from the real drop zones. These weren't just mannequins, they were rigged with recorded gunfire and explosions. When they hit the ground, speakers broadcast the sounds of battle. German units rushed to intercept this airborne assault, pulling defenders away from the real landing zones where 23,400 actual paratroopers were descending. The deception was so successful that even after the landings began, Hitler remained convinced Normandy was a feint. 3 days after D-Day, Agent Garbo sent a crucial message to Berlin. The main assault was still coming at Calais. Most of the Allied army, he reported, remained in England, ready to cross the Strait of Dover. The Germans believed him. For 7 weeks after D-Day, they kept powerful armored divisions near Calais, waiting for an invasion that would never come. Those divisions could have crushed the Allied beachhead. Instead, they sat idle, victims of the greatest deception in military history. With the deception in place, Eisenhower finalized the invasion plan. Operation Overlord was divided into 2 phases. The first, Operation Neptune, covered the amphibious assault and the establishment of a secure beachhead. The second phase would be the breakout and liberation of France. The target, a 50-mile stretch of Normandy coastline, divided into 5 beach sectors. From west to east, Utah and Omaha, American sectors, Gold and Juneau, British and Canadian, and Sword, British. Each beach had its own objectives, challenges, and nightmares waiting in the German defenses. But before a single soldier stepped onto the sand, the airborne forces would go in. In the hours before dawn on June 6, 3 complete airborne divisions, the American 82nd and 101st, and the British 6th, would parachute or glide behind enemy lines. Their missions were critical. The 82nd and 101st would secure the western flank, capturing key bridges and crossroads around the Cotentin Peninsula. They had to prevent German reinforcements from reaching Utah Beach and link up with the amphibious forces. The British 6th Airborne would seize the eastern flank, capturing bridges over the Caen Canal and Orne River, and destroying the Merville Battery, whose guns could devastate Sword Beach. These men knew they were going in blind. Night jumps were chaotic. The aircraft would be under fire. Many wouldn't land where they were supposed to. Some would drown in flooded fields the Germans had deliberately created. Others would be killed before they hit the ground. But without them, the invasion could fail before it even started. The naval armada was unprecedented. Nearly 7,000 vessels assembled for Operation Neptune. Battleships, destroyers, cruisers, minesweepers, landing craft, transport ships, and specialized vessels. 80% of them were British, 16.5% American, with the rest from France, Holland, Norway, and Poland. Over 195,000 naval personnel crewed these ships, the largest fleet ever assembled for a single operation. The naval bombardment would begin at dawn. Battleships and cruisers would hammer German coastal defenses, trying to knock out artillery positions, bunkers, and obstacles before the landing craft hit the beaches. It was supposed to soften the defenses, make the landing easier. On most beaches it would help. On Omaha Beach it would fail catastrophically. Behind the scenes, every detail was planned with obsessive precision. The Allies even solved the port problem before the invasion began. Since the Germans would destroy or defend any existing deep-water port, the Allies decided to bring their own. 2 massive artificial harbors, codenamed Mulberry, would be towed across the channel and assembled off the Norman coast. These engineering marvels would allow the rapid unloading of supplies and reinforcements without capturing an intact port. But all the planning in the world could uncontrol the one factor that nearly derailed everything: the weather. June 5, 1944, southern England is consumed by a massive storm. Rain lashes the camps, winds howl across the airfields. The English Channel is a churning mess of gray water and whitecaps. The invasion fleet, already partially at sea, wallows in the swells. Eisenhower faces the decision of his life. The invasion window is incredibly narrow. The planners needed 3 things to align: a late-rising full moon for the airborne operations, low tide at dawn to expose German obstacles on the beaches, and favorable weather. Those conditions would only occur for a few days in early June, and then not again for weeks. The original target date was June 5th, but the weather was impossible: gale force winds, poor visibility, rough seas. Landing craft would swamp. Paratroopers would be scattered or miss their drop zones entirely. Naval bombardment would be ineffective. It was a recipe for disaster. Eisenhower postponed 24 hours. But the weather forecast for June 6th wasn't much better. His chief meteorologist, Group Captain James Stagg, predicted a brief window, maybe 36 hours, when the weather would improve slightly before another storm rolled in. It wasn't ideal, it was barely acceptable. But it was the only chance they'd get. A further delay meant waiting 2 weeks for the tides and moon to align again. 2 more weeks of keeping 2.9 million men and 5,000 ships hidden. 2 more weeks for the Germans to discover the truth. 2 more weeks of feeding Stalin's suspicions that the Western allies were deliberately stalling. The invasion had to go now, or the entire strategic situation could collapse. At 4:15 a.m. on June 5th, in a cold room at Southwick House near Portsmouth, Eisenhower gathered his top commanders: Montgomery, Air Chief Marshal Lee Mallory, Admiral Ramsey, and others. They reviewed the forecast. The room was tense. Lee Mallory was pessimistic. He predicted catastrophic losses for the airborne forces. Others expressed doubt. The seas would be rough. Visibility marginal. Everything was on a knife's edge. Eisenhower walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back, staring out into the storm. The fate of millions rested on his decision. Finally, he turned back to his commanders and said 3 words that would change history. "Okay, we'll go." He wrote a second message that day, one he hoped he'd never have to use. On a small notepad, Eisenhower scribbled a press release accepting full responsibility for failure. He mistakenly dated it July 5th instead of June 5th, a nervous slip that revealed the pressure he was under. The note read, "Our landings have failed and I have withdrawn the troops. My decision to attack at this time and place was based on the best information available. The troops, the air, and the Navy did all that bravery and devotion to duty could do. If any blame or fault attaches to the attempt, it is mine alone." He folded the note and put it in his pocket where it would stay for weeks, unused. June 6, 1944, 12:15 a.m. The first shots of D-Day aren't fired from ships or tanks. They come from the sky. British glider-borne troops of the 6th Airborne Division crash land beside 2 vital bridges: the Canal Bridge, later named Pegasus Bridge, and the Orne River Bridge. Their mission: capture them intact before the Germans can blow them up. In a matter of minutes, both bridges are secured. The eastern flank is safe. By 1 a.m., the sky over Normandy fills with the roar of C-47 transport planes. American paratroopers from the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions leap into the darkness. The jump is chaos. Anti-aircraft fire rips through the formations. Pilots take evasive maneuvers. Paratroopers are scattered across miles of French countryside. Some land in flooded fields and drown, weighed down by equipment. Others land directly in German positions and are killed before they can free themselves from their parachutes. But despite the chaos, they accomplish their mission. Small groups of paratroopers coalesce in the darkness, guided by clickers, little metal toys that make a distinctive sound. Click-clack becomes the call and response that reunites scattered units. They seize crossroads, cut telephone lines, blow up bridges, and create havoc behind German lines. The defenders don't know what's happening. Reports are confused, contradictory. How many enemy troops are there? Where are they? The fog of war descends thick and impenetrable. At 5:30 a.m., as the first gray light touches the horizon, the naval bombardment begins. Battleships like USS Texas and HMS Warspite open up with their massive guns, hurling shells the size of small cars at the German fortifications. Cruisers and destroyers join in. The noise is deafening, apocalyptic. The entire coastline erupts in flame and smoke, but there's a problem. Many of the targets are hidden in reinforced concrete bunkers. The bombs dropped by Allied aircraft in the pre-dawn darkness miss their targets entirely. They crater fields and towns behind the beaches, but leave the German strongpoints untouched. The naval bombardment is more effective, but it's not enough. The Germans have built well. Many of their positions survive. At 6:30 a.m., the first wave hits the beaches. Utah Beach has the easiest time. A navigation error causes the landing craft to drift south, away from the heavily defended planned landing zone. The troops come ashore in a lightly defended area, and the combat engineers quickly clear paths through the obstacles. Brigadier General Theodore Roosevelt, Jr., son of the former president and, at 56, the oldest man in the assault lands with the first wave. Seeing that they're in the wrong place, he makes an instant decision. We'll start the war from right here. Utah Beach costs 197 casualties, the lightest of any beach. Omaha Beach is hell on earth. The American 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions hit a stretch of beach dominated by high bluffs and defended by the German 352nd Infantry Division, a full-strength veteran unit that Allied intelligence didn't know was there. The pre-invasion bombardment failed. The German positions are intact and bristling with machine guns, mortar, and artillery. As the landing craft drop their ramps, German gunners open fire. Men are cut down before they can even wade ashore. The water turns red. Bodies float in the surf. Those who make it to the sand find themselves trapped on a narrow beach under withering fire from above. Obstacles and mines make movement almost impossible. Specialized tanks meant to support the infantry have sunk in the rough seas. 27 of 29 drowned before reaching shore. For hours, the situation on Omaha is desperate. Entire companies are pinned down, taking horrific casualties. At one point, General Omar Bradley, commanding from a ship offshore, considers abandoning Omaha and diverting reinforcements to other beaches. The invasion is on the verge of catastrophic failure, but small groups of soldiers begin moving. Individuals in small teams, often led by junior officers and NCOs, find gaps in the defenses. They crawl through minefields, climb the bluffs under fire, flank German positions. Destroyer captains, seeing the slaughter, risk running aground and bring their ships dangerously close to shore, firing point-blank at German bunkers. By late morning, the Americans have clawed their way off Omaha Beach. The cost is staggering, over 2,000 casualties. But they hold. By nightfall, they've pushed a mile inland. It's not as far as planned, but it's a foothold barely. Gold, Juno, and Sword Beaches see British and Canadian forces face determined resistance, but fare better than Omaha. Specialized armor Churchill. Tanks modified with flamethrowers, mine flails, and bridge layers prove their worth. These funnies help the troops overcome obstacles and suppress German strongpoints. On Juno Beach, the Canadians face brutal fighting against fortified positions. But by day's end, they've pushed further inland than any other Allied force, nearly 7 miles. On Sword Beach, British troops link up with the paratroopers of the 6th Airborne Division, securing the eastern flank. By the end of June 6, 1944, the Allies have 160,000 troops ashore. The invasion has succeeded. It's not perfect, a major objective for the first day, remains in German hands and will take weeks of brutal fighting to capture. The forces haven't linked up their beachheads into a continuous front. And casualties are heavy, over 10,000 Allied soldiers killed, wounded, or missing. But they're ashore, the Atlantic Wall is breached. Hitler's fortress Europe has a crack in it, and that crack is about to become a floodgate. The success of D-Day didn't end the deception. Far from it. Operation Bodyguard had one more critical job: keep the Germans paralyzed. On June 9th, 3 days after the invasion, Agent Garbo sent his most important message yet. He told his German handlers that the Normandy landings were merely a diversion. The real invasion, the main assault, was still coming at Calais. Fusag, under Patton's command, was still massed in southeastern England, ready to strike. The Germans believed him. Intercepts decoded by British codebreakers at Bletchley Park confirmed it. The German High Command accepted Garbo's report. Hitler kept his strongest armored divisions near Calais, waiting for the Phantom Army. For 7 weeks, as the Allies fought to expand their beachhead in Normandy, crucial German reinforcements sat idle 150 miles away. The 15th Army, one of Germany's strongest forces, remained in the Pas-de-Calais region, defending against an invasion that would never come. Those 7 weeks were everything. They allowed the Allies to land over 850,000 men, 148,000 vehicles, and 570,000 tons of supplies by the end of June. They gave, Eisenhower timed to build the beachhead into an unbreakable lodgment. By the time Hitler finally realized he'd been deceived, it was too late. The fighting in Normandy was brutal. The Norman bocage-dense hedgerows, narrow roads, and small fields turned into a nightmare for the Allies. The Germans used every hedgerow as a defensive position, creating killing fields that stalled the American advance. Progress was measured in yards, bought with blood. Entire companies were chewed up in savage close-quarters fighting. Caen, the city that was supposed to fall on D-Day, held out for 6 weeks. British and Canadian forces hammered at it repeatedly, but German defenders turned it into rubble and fought for every street. The city was finally captured on July 20th, but by then it was a moonscape of destruction. The breakthrough came on July 25th with Operation Cobra. American forces, frustrated by weeks of hedgerow fighting, unleashed a massive carpet bombing campaign followed by an armored thrust near Saint-Lay. The German defensive line shattered. Patton's Third Army, now real, not phantom, poured through the gap. The German 7th Army, trying to contain the breakout, launched a desperate counterattack on August 7th at Mortain. Hitler personally ordered it, demanding his commanders retake the initiative. It was a disaster. Allied air power and artillery annihilated the attacking forces. The counterattack didn't just fail, it created a catastrophic opportunity for the Allies. American forces swung north while British and Canadian troops pushed south, creating a pocket around the town of Calais. By August 19th, 50,000 German soldiers were trapped, 10,000 killed, 40,000 captured. Thousands more barely escaped, leaving behind their equipment. The German army in Normandy was shattered. Paris was liberated on August 25, 1944. Moment of jubilation as French and American troops marched down the Champs-Élysées. By August 30th, German forces retreated east across the Seine River. Operation Overlord was officially over. The cost was immense. Allied forces suffered over 200,000 casualties in the Battle of Normandy, killed, wounded, or missing. The exact German casualties are still debated, but the liberation of Western Europe had begun. The tide of the war had irrevocably turned. Within 9 months, Allied forces would cross the Rhine and advance deep into Germany. On May 8, 1945, Germany surrendered unconditionally. None of it would have been possible without June 6, 1944. Operation Overlord stands as one of the most complex military operations ever attempted. It required the coordination of land, sea, and air forces from multiple nations on a scale never before seen. It demanded meticulous planning, audacious deception, and the courage of hundreds of thousands of soldiers willing to charge into the teeth of Hitler's Atlantic Wall. The Deception Operations Operation Bodyguard and Fortitude were so successful that historians still consider them the gold standard of military deception. The combination of physical deceptions, electronic warfare, and human intelligence created a web of lies so convincing that Hitler continued to believe them even as the truth unfolded before his eyes. But ultimately, the success of D-Day came down to the soldiers, the paratroopers who jumped into the unknown darkness, the sailors who guided landing craft through withering fire, the infantrymen who crossed those beaches despite watching their comrades fall, the engineers who cleared obstacles under fire, the medics who worked through the chaos, trying to save lives amidst the slaughter. Eisenhower never had to use the note in his pocket, accepting blame for failure. Instead, he witnessed the beginning of the end of Nazi Germany. The note surfaced years later, a reminder of how close it all came to disaster, and how much hinged on that single decision in a storm-lashed English manor house. Today, the beaches of Normandy are peaceful, but the scars remain. Bunkers still sit in the sand, and tens of thousands of white crosses mark American graves at cemeteries overlooking the sea. They're a reminder of the price paid for freedom and of the day when ordinary men accomplished the extraordinary. June 6, 1944, D-Day, the day that changed the world. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Operation Overlord, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more World War II documentaries. What aspect of D-Day do you find most fascinating? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.